Hello, I'm here with a little pre-episode request. It is that time of year again. It is British Podcast Award season, and therefore I am asking you if you feel so inclined to vote for Real Life Ghost Stories in the Listener's Choice Award for this year's British Podcast Awards. In order to do this, you need to go to britishpodcastawards.com/voting. And it's really simple and easy to do. It takes about 30 seconds. You just type in the podcast. They will send you a verification email. And it's very important that you click the link in the email that you receive to verify your vote. And look, here's the thing. Real Life Ghost Stories has done really well in the last couple of years in the Listener's Choice for both the Irish Podcast Awards and the British Podcast Awards. And that's all on you guys. So thank you for taking the time to vote for the last couple of years. And fundamentally for indie podcasts like this, it is just really good advertising, you know? So I really would encourage you that if you're voting for Real Life Ghost Stories, cast a vote for other indie podcasts that you like too. It really can make all the difference to us smaller indie podcasts. Thank you to everybody who has voted previously, who has already voted this year. The voting closes on the 29th of August. So, you know, get those votes in at britishpodcastawards.com/voting. Thank you. Enjoy the episode.
We all belong outside. We're drawn to nature, whether it's the recorded sounds of the ocean we doze off to, or the succulents that adorn our homes. Nature makes all of our lives, well, better. Despite all this, we often go about our busy lives removed from it. But the outdoors is closer than we realize. With All Trails, you can discover trails nearby and explore confidently. With offline maps and on-trail navigation, download the free app today and make the most of your summer with All Trails.
Hello and welcome to mini episode 369 of Real Life Ghost Stories. And I have two spooky stories for you today, and the last story comes from the 12th of June 2024. And story number 1 comes from Abby. I consider myself to be a skeptic. I'd love to believe in an afterlife. Honestly, it would alleviate many of my worries and probably fix my iffy feelings towards death. But I cannot for the life of me believe in one. This disbelief, coupled with my tendency to rationalise everything and focus on the facts, leads me to be quite dismissive of paranormal experiences. Yet there have been moments in my life that I do find incredibly odd. Maybe not paranormal, but spooky nonetheless. This will be quite all over the place as many of the events are unconnected, so I apologise for that. I was told by my mum and some others more recently that I am intuitive. To quote my mum, "You just know things." I've never really considered this before, but looking back, there have been a couple of times. I'll start with the most recent, which happened in March of this year. I woke up one morning, groggy with a bad feeling. I didn't know what, but something was off. Lying in bed, I heard my parents talking in the lounge room, though with the door shut, and in my half-awake state, I could barely hear what they were saying. The only words I made out were, "It's just bad timing." I immediately knew that one of my grandmas had died. There had been no other clues, nothing else said or heard that would lead me to this, but I just knew. I got up then, though immediately went to the bathroom as I felt awful. I was then told through the door by my mum that her mother had died. With this confirmation, I just sat on the floor of the bathroom, thinking how ironically cruel the universe can be, as she died the Friday before Mother's Day. Don't worry though, we've come to terms with this event, and in all honesty, I was never close with that grandma as she didn't remember me. However, I felt for my mum, who was going to bring her brownies that day. There have been a few occasions of me knowing when people are about to die or calling their coming deaths, such as my father's dad and the Queen, both back in 2022. This was before hearing that either of them were unwell. I just knew months in advance that they would die. It's a bit silly to count the Queen as one of those prophesied deaths, but I called it way before anyone else I know. And to clarify, they didn't die at the same time, just the same year. There have been a few other weird things in my life, mainly when I was younger. Yes, I was kind of a creepy kid. You could tell by the look of me. The most common thing said about my appearance was that I looked like Wednesday Addams. The one from the 90s though, as I was an early 2000s baby. But when I was younger, according to my mum, every full moon I would wake up and come into my parents' room. I've no memory of this, but apparently it was so much like clockwork that when I stopped, my mum got worried. I also heard someone once. I have no idea who. I was 5 and upstairs in the office doing some schoolwork and the door was shut. When I heard a man's voice say my name right in my ear, it was like a loud whisper. This man sounded like he was in his 20s or 30s, but there was no one in the room. I opened the door and called out to my family to ask if they had called my name, but they didn't. I knew deep down that it was none of their voices. I have a sister and both of my parents were on the older side even when I was young, so I knew it couldn't be them. I never got an explanation for that, and now chalk it up to an auditory hallucination. I also saw a shadow lady playing with my dad's hair while he slept one night. The shadow lady had a ponytail and was wearing active clothes. I have no idea how I saw this because she was pure blackness. I thought it was my babysitter who had left earlier, but when she turned to me, a bit startled by my presence, she disappeared. My family likes to joke that we have ghosts in our house. These next stories come from my father, who's even more of a skeptic than me. When he would work late at night, he would sit at the dining table and see the hallway behind him, reflected in the glass of the back door. Some nights he would see figures running around my room, as you could see straight into it from the hallway. However, whenever he checked to see if I was still in bed, I was. And I know that I never sleepwalked. I would probably now say this was tiredness getting to my dad, but it's strange that it happened more than once. His final spooky story involves our cat. This only happened once, but he is absolutely astounded by it. For context, we have a ragdoll cat who is mostly white and in low light you can still make her out. One night my dad was about to go to bed when he saw my cat in the hallway. She walked to come greet him, and when he reached down to pat her, his hand felt nothing and the cat disappeared. He is adamant that he saw our cat and struggles to rationally explain it. This final story wigs me out now as a young adult. When I was younger, on those nights when I would go into my parents' room and I would see shadow people. Now, this is normal. The dark, sleep, they like to play tricks on the eyes. But every time I would wake up, I saw the exact same shadow people. It began with me opening my eyes and looking to my open doorway. There, a tall figure would peer from out in the hallway, its long fingers curled around the door frame. I never saw its body, only its head and hands. Every time it would peer at me, then remove its hands and go back to the hallway. I would get up and walk to my door, where out in the hall I would see this massive spider thing, though it had way too many legs to be a spider and was about the size of a small circular rug. There was no rug in the hallway. I would step on it and it would dissipate. I'd walk to the end of the hallway and look out into the lounge room, which was on the opposite side of the house. Here I would see a bear. I live in Australia and I can guarantee that apart from zoos there are no bears, so I have no idea why the shadow was a bear. The bear would stand on its hind legs, its head almost touching the ceiling, and it would begin to walk over to me. This is the part where I would sprint up the stairs and look down from the top to see the bear at the bottom. It would then begin to run up the stairs. I would turn and go into my parents' room and crawl in between them to see the bear in their doorway. It never came in and I would just have to wait until it disappeared. It never disappeared right away. The truly spooky part about this story I only found out last year. My sister is 5 years older than me, and we've only recently begun to get closer. One night, we got onto the topic of spooky things, and she mentioned something about a shadow bear that used to chase her to our parents' room. In response, I said, "You've seen the bear too." She then went on to tell me the exact same experience I had, minus the spider with too many legs. She too had the figure peer around her doorway, though he never put his hands on the frame. She saw the bear too, and it chased her as it did me, though the bear never came to the doorway when she got into our parents' room. I got her to draw the bear, and I drew one at the same time. Our pictures were almost identical. We had never spoken of this with each other. I didn't know she even saw shadow people. Though us experiencing the same bear chase lends to the possible connection we have. Another spooky thing between us is that almost every time I dream about teeth, so does she. We'll wake up in the morning and mention that we had a teeth dream, and the other will almost always say that they had one too. Oh, that is wild. So I have an older sister, and it was only later in life that we realised that we both have the same bad dreams. Not necessarily nightmares, but we both have dreams about dinosaurs when we have bad dreams, and we will wake up and text each other and be like, "Oh, I had the dinosaur dream last night." But before we dive into that, let's go back to the very beginning. So I love when a story starts with, "Look, I'm a skeptic. I don't necessarily believe that these things are paranormal, but they're weird things that happened." That brings me joy. And I do think, so going back to the beginning of this, I do think that sometimes people just know things. I don't know how to describe it. Maybe it is psychological. Maybe it is that you have a feeling and in hindsight you prescribe it to a certain thing that happened afterwards. I don't know. But when people say, "I had this feeling that, something awful was going to happen. I just knew that my grandmother had passed away. I just knew that the Queen was going to die. I just knew that my other grandmother was going to pass away." Like, I fully believe that. I had my own experience with that a number of years ago where my mum's phone rang and I just knew that this person had died. It was the strangest feeling I've ever had, and it was like it still gives me the heebie-jeebies when I think about it. Her phone, literally the sound of her phone ringing, and in my head I went, "Oh my God, this person has just died." And it was a weird sudden death. Like it was just very strange. I do think it happens to people, and I think, obviously in this case, like that's only ever happened to me once. It is not a common thing in my life, but for Abby, like it seems that you have this knowing for whatever reason, and that you seem to prophesy that things are going to happen. And it does sound like you were a creepy kid, rocking up every bloody full moon into your parents' bedroom like Wednesday Addams. I'd be like, no, I'd be locking my door that night. And it sounds like there was a lot of activity in the house, and it's interesting that you as a skeptic experienced this activity in like the woman in activewear that was, rubbing your dad's hair and various shadow figures, etc. But your dad also experienced the same thing. And of course, like you said, you can always say, it's tiredness. You're seeing things out of the corner of your eye because you're tired. And I have to say, like, I know that everybody experiences tiredness and stress, etc. differently. But as somebody who has insomnia and is tired pretty much all of the time, I never see things out of the corner of my eye. I never have experiences that I'm like, "Oh, that was weird," but then put it down to tiredness. So yes, I think that tiredness can account for a lot of things, but I don't think it can account for everything. And as for the cat situation, right? The little white ragdoll cat, which I love ragdoll cats. I think they're divine. But like, what was it that your dad saw? Like, was it tiredness, like you said? Was it your cat like astral projecting, and your dad then happened to see it and went to touch it and it disappeared? Or was it something completely different entirely? Like, was it just something else, maybe related to spider/bear that you and your sister saw later? Your house sounds like a regular portal. And boo, I hate even saying that. It gives me Ghost Adventures vibes. So the last bit of your story, like as I was reading it and I was thinking about what it could be, is it possible that what you saw wasn't a bear? As in, you know, obviously it wasn't a bear, like we know that, but bear shaped is how you and your sister described it. Was it the lack of language or the lack of understanding or misunderstanding of that shadow figure that made you both describe it as bear shaped? Like, was it actually something else entirely? I can't even imagine what it felt like, you know, a year ago that your sister was like, oh yeah, I've seen that bear too. I can't even imagine what that felt like, because surely for all those years you'd be thinking this was some sort of weird like night terror that I would have or whatever. And then to hear that your sister experienced the same thing, like what does that mean? Does that mean you were both seeing something that was happening in the house, or seeing something that was at least showing itself to the two of you, or that the two of you could see and experience? Was the rug spider, which is just an easier way to describe it, was the rug spider like a part of a dream or a night terror? Or was it part of the situation with the bear? I'm giving nothing here, just asking questions and giving nothing that could even come close to an answer, which is really standard for the podcast. I leave you with more questions than answers and absolutely no further to understanding what it is that happened in this story.
Did I hear you're shopping for a car? Because I've been at it for ages. Ugh, such a time suck, right?
Not really. I bought it on Carvana. Super convenient.
Oh, then comes all the financing, research. Am I right?
Well, you can, but I got pre-qualified for a Carvana auto loan in like 2 minutes.
Yeah, but then all the number crunching and terms, right?
Nope. I saw real numbers as I shopped, found my dream car, and got it in a couple of days.
Wait, like you already have it?
Yep.
Oh.
Go to Carvana.com to finance your car the convenient way.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
And story number 2 comes from Hayley. I recently finished up a half-sleeve tattoo with an artist I've been seeing for about a decade. I worked with her long-term girlfriend before they were together about 18 years ago, so that's how I found her, and always love catching up a bit with each tattoo sitting I've had. This session was about 6 hours, so we chatted quite a bit. Some of which included her telling me about the spirit she and the other artists have had experiences with in the shop. When I arrived for my appointment, she showed me some concepts, asked about adding some flowers to fill more space, etc., and left me in the waiting area to prep her chair and work on the stencil. I was just hanging out, looking at the art in the waiting area, which is also an art gallery, listening to music, and the power in the building flickers off for maybe a second and comes back on. I just hear, "Dude," from her studio. She comes out and says, "Yeah, that may have been our ghost." Once we were set up in the chair and getting to business, I bring it back up. "So, you gotta tell me about this ghost, obviously." The building the shop is in is located in an older part of the city, very industrial, but being gentrified with coffee shops and vintage stores. It's always been a spot for artists and studios, so it makes sense that they chose this location years ago when the studio was coming together. Prior to their leasing the space, it had been used as a photography studio, owned by a husband and wife team. They also lived in the building and had a section of it set up with their accommodations. The husband was diagnosed with cancer and after some time unfortunately passed away in the building. The studio is broken up into different areas where the artists work. There's a small entry room, a hall to the right with a bathroom. Straight ahead is a hallway with a few rooms to the left. To the right is a larger shared space room, separated from the hall by a half wall where my artist's chair is, and in the back is the waiting area / art studio. There is a large lighting fixture in the centre of the ceiling in the room where my artist works, that kind of sunbursts out from the centre with Edison-style light bulbs at the end of the wires. The bulbs kept flickering randomly at odd times, and that went on for some time. They changed all the bulbs, checked the wires, etc., and found no issues with the electrical components. This is an older building, so that could be the reason for the issue. On the right side of this larger room is another bathroom with a long, narrow hallway that spans the length of the room, accessible from the waiting area/art studio. This is the bathroom for customers and is upgraded versus the other bathroom that isn't. Even before knowing any of this hallway and bathroom gave me a creepy vibe, like something was off. The energy is specific. She said some of the other female artists and apprentices use the other bathroom even though it's not great, specifically to avoid this bathroom. She herself used the other bathroom while I was there for my appointment. So I guess thanks for sending me to the haunted one. Another experience she told me about was a bit more unnerving and confirmed their suspicions of something a little more than electrical issues and creepy vibes. In one of the smaller rooms off of the main hallway, one of the resident artists was being tattooed by a friend who was visiting town, and they were alone in the shop. The shop is appointment only, so no walk-ins, but there are usually other artists taking appointments throughout the week. The doorway to this smaller room is across from the area in the larger room where my artist's chair sits. Looking out of this room through the door, you can see her chair. He was sitting, getting his work done, chatting with his friend, when he had a notion to look slightly to his left and out into this larger room. When he did, he saw a figure of a man wearing a flat-brimmed hat standing where my artist's chair is, looking back at him. He immediately assumed he'd left the front door open and someone had walked in, unaware of their appointment-only policy. He stopped his friend working, got up, and once he got out of the smaller room, he discovered the shop was empty and the front door was locked. The next day, when the other artists were back at work, he told them about his experience with the man in the hat. The main artist and manager of the shop jumped up and quickly went outside. When he came back in, he said he'd called the landlord, the wife of the photography duo, and asked her to send him a photo of her husband. She did. And when he showed the artist the image of her husband, he said, without a doubt, that that was who he saw. In the photo she sent, he was wearing a flat-brimmed hat. I like to think the spirit is just hanging out, enjoying the creative energy he thrived on in his life earthside, and wants to continue to look over the shop. But he needs to give some privacy and stay out of the bathroom. Hayley, I just want to say that fair play to you getting tattooed for 6 hours at a time. Because that is, if you've not been tattooed, getting tattooed for 6 hours is impressive. And I have done it a couple of times in my youth, and I can no longer do it as a grown-up because I'm too old and I can't manage the pain anymore. So good for you getting your 6 hour half sleeve done. Oh God, it gives me the heebie-jeebies even thinking about it. But then to also be dealing with a haunted building at the same time, no thank you. And I agree. You know, if this guy, this photographer who used to be in the studio, if he wants to be back and looking after the place and just having a look at what art is being created, then good for him. But the bathroom is not the way to go to haunt places. You know, don't haunt the bathroom. People need their privacy. They need a minute, okay? Just don't do that. And this story has really made me wonder, like, obviously there's a lot of stuff went on in the studio, like lights flickering, etc., etc. And of course you go, it's an old building. These things happen. Lights are going to flicker. Electrical issues happen. That's just it's just part and parcel of being in an old building, or even in any building. You know, you're going to say, oh, that's weird, there's an electrical issue, or that's strange, there's obviously a draft and that's why that door is slamming, or oh, that corridor feels a bit weird. But you generally wouldn't, even with the corridor one, you probably wouldn't voice that to people until you'd been there for a while. If you felt a bit off and a bit creepy going down that corridor, you probably wouldn't really say anything. And it makes me wonder how much stuff is dismissed as being like the product of dodgy fixtures or an old building that actually potentially is paranormal. And it's a pretty weird thing to think about. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you to Abby and Hayley for sending in your stories. Remember, the last story came from the 12th of June 2024. And just to say, as I've been recording this, I live next door to a big mechanics, and the guys who work in the shop, they listen to the radio really loudly, right? That's not an issue. But sometimes they get deep into their feelings and they'll put big ballads on and sing along to them. Now, I love it. I think it's hilarious. It makes me laugh so much. So if you can hear faintly Adele being hollered in the background, that is what is happening in the background of my recording today. So I apologize if you can hear that. Also, it is podcast awards voting season. So I will be doing my general yearly call out for votes for the Listener's Choice Award if you feel so inclined to do that. I know sometimes people are like, please no more of this, because they don't like the repetition of the call out for votes. But I just would really appreciate it if you could vote for Real Life Ghost Stories. I'll put the links in all the usual places. And just to say too, that main episodes will be resuming in about 2 weeks' time. So thank you all for your patience with that. Now that I've interrupted my own blurb, I can't remember what it is I have to say next. You can check out the website reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. If you would like to send in your own story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/Real Life Ghost Stories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time. Seamless, honestly.
Hi, Brooke here from Naked Beauty. When I tell you that Sunglass Hut is really my go-to to really kick off summer, because they have such a good curated summer collection, perfectly aligned for finding every shade of you. Sunglass Hut really has shades at every price point, and they are so incredibly helpful there. They will take their time with you. They even tightened my glasses to make sure they didn't fall off my head. They gladly adjusted them for me. And if you need a prescription lens, they can add that into your sunglasses as well. Sunglass Hut really has it all, and again, a frame for every shade of you.